So we're catching up with Jules Evans of Heresy and Heelz. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good, good. Well, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us today. Tell us a little bit about the show last night. I mean, there was a good crowd.
I think we had about 250 to 300 people in there. The show went down really well. We did really a sort of a customised show, especially for this event, and we tried to present the whole sort of spectrum of what people understand to be burlesque. So we had everything from sort of very traditional burlesque noir through to sort of bump and grind, some sort of fetishy, twisted cabaret kind of performance, and also, you know, what you would refer to as probably classic burlesque. So we tried to present the whole spectrum of the art form, really.
Yeah. Now, I mean, how did you first get into this kind of area of work? Because again, the more and more you kind of research into burlesque and stuff, it's always kind of been there and was always kind of quite niche, very small targeted market and stuff. But now it seems to become a bit more mainstream, and certainly things like Facebook, we were just talking about social media, has made it a lot more popular.
Yeah, I've been involved in the whole thing for about 3 years, really through my wife, who discovered burlesque at an event. She has always been very much into the sort of vintage glamour, corsets, that kind of thing. So really, the interest in burlesque came from that. She started performing herself under the stage name Miss Pink and Fluffy, and it was really through attending some amateur events with her. I was constantly feeling that I could probably organise something that was a lot better than this. Yeah. And I kept going on and on to saying, look, you know, I could organise an event that's so much better than this. Yeah. And in the end, we ended up doing a small event at a room above a pub in Nottingham back in 2009. And within 6 months we were running events for 300 people at a big venue in Derby. We've done events in Birmingham, and this year we've expanded out and we've done an event in Brighton. We're doing an event in Manchester next weekend, and we're also about to start a big alternative and burlesque fair, which is a daytime event with lots of traders.
Now, I would say almost like some members of the public would say, like, you know, not quite sure about it. I think you've got more on your card there. It's more tees than sleeves and stuff like that. And I think what's interesting listening to you there, it's almost like when you go to, as you just said, amateur events. What happens then is the art side, the art form side of burlesque, and the culture of what it is, actually almost needs that kind of stage that you created last night, isn't it? That lighting and all that. And if you put that kind of performance in the right setting, then actually it is an art form, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, very much. I mean, the history. Burlesque has got a fascinating history, because most people, when you mention, if you'd said burlesque to someone 5 years ago, most people probably wouldn't have had a clue what you were talking about. If you mention burlesque to someone now, it instantly creates an image of feather fans, Dita Von Teese, tassels, sequins, corsets, etc. But the history of burlesque has actually got nothing to do with that whatsoever. The art form itself is around about 200 to 300 years old, and originated in ancient Greece. And burlesque literally means to send up or to parody. The origins of burlesque were really, it was a form of sort of almost working man's theatre for the lower and the working classes. The upper classes went to opera. Burlesque was really a send-up and a parody of the things that the upper classes got up to. So it was really, it was somewhere in between, sort of similar to music hall in a way. It was quite bawdy, women dressed up as men dressed up as women, and it's always had a slightly bawdy and a slightly risque side.
Raucous.
Yeah, but the striptease element, which is now almost synonymous with burlesque, really crept in in the 30s, and it was largely America that was responsible for it, because burlesque crossed the channel, the Americans loved it, but when movies came out in the 30s, the burlesque houses were struggling to get bums on seats, because people didn't want to go to live shows so much, they wanted to go and see movies. So the promoters, to try and encourage the audiences to come back, were encouraging the girls to just show a little bit more flesh here, a little bit more flesh there, a bit of ankle, a bit of shoulder, and it just kind of went further and further and further and further, until the whole sort of striptease element gradually came in. So what we've effectively got now is we've got a mixture of the sort of old-fashioned, slightly comedy, parody kind of what we call British burlesque, mixed with the American, very glitzy, very glamorous showgirl striptease kind of thing, and then other elements have crept in, like the sort of influences from the fetish scene, where burlesque has always been very, very, very popular. Clubs like Torture Garden were putting burlesque on back in the 90s, again when it was a very, very niche thing. So it's got a fascinating history.
So do you think events like this give it an opportunity to kind of not mainstream itself so much, but to kind of cross over into other areas? Because I mean, I'm quite impressed with this event, the way you've got sort of, airbrushers, people who are into tattooing, and then you've got this, and you've got the vehicles and stuff. It worked. It seems to work, doesn't it?
What you find is all of these scenes tend to have very, very, very big crossovers. The whole vintage rockabilly and tattoo culture has always the fashion gives it that link into burlesque, and burlesque crosses into so many different scenes because of the culture, because of the fashions, because of the era, where that whole sort of 30s to 50s, which is the sort of era that burlesque is largely synonymous with, although it does go back, its origins do go back much further than that.
Excellent. So, what's your next event? What are you moving on to after the event last night?
Is next weekend in Manchester. We're doing a Heresy and Heelz club night on the Friday night, which is Friday 9th of September, and then we're doing a large alternative and burlesque fair in the same venue on the Saturday daytime, which will be 40 traders, which will be everything from fetish culture and fetish fashion to gothic fashion to burlesque and vintage accessories, clothing, and we've got performances on during the day. So that's a whole weekend of entertainment.
Jules, thanks for talking to us, and good luck next week.
That's great, yeah. Thanks a lot.